Hello everybody, welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Aniyah, and today I am doing a roundup of favorite things I've read so far this year. It is June, it is the midpoint, and I ran out of pages in my first reading journal of the year. So that signifies that it is time to take a look back and highlight some books that are especially memorable so far. I know there's an official tag called something like the Freak Out or the Mid-Year Freak Out or something like that. And I've done that one before. But I thought I just wanted to kind of talk about some books in a less structured manner. And so that is what I'm going to do today. I looked back through my journal entries, and I've kind of explained my journal practice before, but I have a consideration list. There's a fiction and a nonfiction one. It goes on for pages and pages. And then every book I read, there is an entry. And so I can look back through and see what I was thinking at different times. And so this one is full. It's time to start this one. I always keep an extra one on deck. And then I have some random ones that have extra pages in them, or I just use them for planning. I've got so many journals. I'm planning in this one right now. Love a good journal. I have roughly organized this little talk into some categories. I have rereads, nonfiction and poetry, plays, and new books. And new fiction books doesn't necessarily mean a new release, although some of them are. It could also be an old book or a backlist book, but I'm reading it for the first time. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each book, so I have a lot I want to just touch on. But since it's the midpoint and these are books that are standing out to me, I'm going to pass them on to you in case you missed my earlier reviews. And I know everybody's always looking for more books to inflate their TBRs with, so here we go. First category is rereads. I've had some wonderful rereads this year, and I love rereading books. I'm going to highlight three, and these three are all short books, so any one of them or all three of them would fit beautifully into your Shorty September, which is just around the corner. We have, first of all, the very first book I read this year, which was a reread of The Uncommon Reader by Bennett. This was a buddy read with my friend Michael. It was a wonderful way to start the year. This book is warm and funny. It's about the Queen of England discovering a bookmobile on the grounds of her estate and accidentally becoming a voracious reader. It doesn't happen overnight. First, she struggles to find the right books for her with the help of a new friend, and eventually everything clicks and she just becomes a maniac and has to constantly struggle to attend to anything else, all of these pesky obligations that pop up in the day when all she really wants to do is read her books. Also, I recently read and talked about The Great Gatsby. Here is a 90th edition copy that was a gift from a good friend, and now it's the 100th anniversary. So read The Great Gatsby again and think about what it's telling us from 1925 that is still so relevant today. And on this reading, I thought a lot about these characters, especially our narrator Nick, his unreliability, the things within himself that he is not addressing and acknowledging. And I'm still rolling over a possible standalone video about my thoughts on The Great Gatsby. Just cannot seem to corral them into some sort of reasonable shape to do this. And then last but not least, what I just rambled on and enthused about and carried on about last week was A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr. Oh, I love this book so much. It is such a fantastic little jewel of a novel, and it would be a great double dipper in September because it's short and it's also about our main character trying to restore a medieval painting on the wall of a church. So there's an art connection. So it could qualify for two wonderful September events. Our next category is fiction. No, it is not. It is nonfiction and poetry. And so not this year, but last year, I started a new personal initiative to read at least one nonfiction book every month. And I've been doing really well with that. Sometimes I read more than one, but I always read at least one. And a couple of the standouts so far this year. First of all, I have I Feel Bad About My Neck and Other Thoughts of Being a Woman by Nora Ephron. Now, you know you have a good friend when they send you a paperback of a book and then they come across a hardcover of the same book at a secondhand sale, and then they send you that to upgrade your collection. So this is what happened. My friend Michael sent me this recently, and so now I have this lovely hardcover copy. So when I reread it, I'll be reading this edition. It is so funny. Nora Ephron's essays. If you have never read them, I'm now on a Nora Ephron tear. I read this, I read Heartburn. I have another essay collection of hers that I have yet to read, so I have something wonderful to look forward to. And runner-up in nonfiction that was a library book was Fun Home by Alison Bechdel. Graphic memoir. I've been hearing about it for years. I finally read it. I was so glad, and I do want to read more books by Alison Bechdel. She has a new one out right now. And then on poetry, I want to highlight this collection that came out earlier this year, 44 poems on being with each other. It's compiled and discussed by Padraig Tuama. And I have just gone down such a complete rabbit hole with this poet. The two volumes on the Poetry Unbound series, and then his weekly newsletter that is just always so touching and has such short and thoughtful and powerful. But this is just a great collection. I left all my tabs in so that when I go back I can see what was standing out to me, even though I might change my mind and other things might jump out at me instead when I go back through. The next category is plays. So another new project for me this year was reading more drama. I've been meaning to do it forever, so I decided to make it into an official project to hold my own feet to the fire and put some organization into the whole thing. So I started the Endless Drama Discord, where I have selected 2 plays for each month of the year that are 20th and 21st century plays. Considering already thinking about doing a year 2 and maybe branching out into other time periods. So I will ask about that more formally later in the year, but if you have any opinions that you want to share right now, should I stick to the current format? Should I branch out into older plays? Should I don't know. I'm just thinking about different ideas. But right now, the plays from this year that I want to just talk about really quickly. One was a classic. One of my favorite ones so far this year was a classic that I had never read, which was A Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry. This was magnificent. This is such a good play. I can't believe a lot of people read this in school, but I never did. And it was just outstanding. This story about a family in Chicago that comes into some money and is trying to make some important decisions about what to do with that money. Also, one that I really loved, I don't know if it was everybody's favorite, but I really loved The Flick by Annie Baker. It was the winner of the 2014 Pulitzer Prize. It's a play with just a few characters that takes place entirely in between the screenings at a movie theater that is it's one of the last movie theaters that still uses the reels of film, and it's about to go digital. It's about changing times. It's about the characters being at crossroads in their own lives, at different ages and different situations. A couple of plays that really highlighted societal issues in a really profound and moving way. One of them was Indecent by Paula Vogel. It is a play about a play that was written in 1907 called God of Vengeance, and the play had a good run around Europe, and when it came to America, it was banned. The members of the cast and crew were arrested for indecency. It portrays a relationship between 2 Jewish women, and there's themes about homophobia and anti-Semitism that are really timely and relevant. This is one of the plays that I most would like to see staged because of the way that it is written and the amount of material that is descriptions of visual effects, different ways that the cast assumes different time periods and personas. I'd like to see all that played out. And also one that I got from the library was The Laramie Project by Moises, Kaufman, and the Tectonic Theater Group. I had to think for a minute. This was the play I was scared to read, and with good reason. It is very harrowing. They went to Laramie, Wyoming, in the wake of the murder of Matthew Shepard, and they interviewed all kinds of people all over the town that had different kinds of intersections with that person or that crime. People who knew him, people from the university, people from the town, people who knew the murderers. It was really hard to read in the current climate with the commentaries of people that had some sort of hopeful ideas about changing times, and then the times have not really changed. So this is probably the one that really kind of laid me low, but still I'm glad that I read it. And then finally, a reread, Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller. I just love this second time through with this play, and looking not only at this idea of the American dream and somebody who's just being crushed within the cogs of it, and also this family, this very dysfunctional family with all kinds of toxic behaviors and the legacies of that, and there's just so much in a very slim play. And so we find ourselves in the category of new fiction. New to me, not necessarily new in general. Some of the best novels that I've read so far this year. This is the category where I had the most trouble narrowing things down. And those tags where there's certain prompts, I always get really frustrated because they want you to pick like one book that did this and one book that did that. And what I love doesn't always fit in to those parameters. So instead, I will just ramble freely about a whole bunch of books. So first of all, a book by an author who just won the Nobel Prize for Literature last year, We Do Not Part by Kang. I read this as part of the Reading the Globe project, which is hosted by Roz and Katja. And this was my first Kang book. I loved this book, and I was really excited that people who had read more widely from her said that they didn't think this was her best one, because that just leaves such an avenue for more great reading. This was translated by Yaewon and Paige Aniyah Morris, and from Korean, and it is a strange and surreal, sometimes harsh, always beautifully written story. It's really hard. I can't explain it in a quick way, but you will learn about some very specific aspects of Korean history, but it gets much more personal because of the two women that are at the heart of the book. A very different kind of book that I really loved this year so far was Barchester Towers by Anthony Trollope. And this was the second book in the Barchester Chronicles. I always get stuck on that. The first is The Warden. Barchester Towers was second. It was so excellent. It is rich. It is funny. The characters and their machinations. It's in a small town. It's just absolutely gold. It's even colored gold. And I have ordered book number 3, and I will be reading that sometime in the second half of this year. But I loved Barchester Towers by Anthony Trollope. You could definitely put this into your Victober lineup. Well, you really need to start with The Warden. Put The Warden in your Victober lineup. And we have kind of a dystopian boulevard that we have to go down. This is just partly because of where my interests are lying, but partly just because these books are so fantastic. So first of all, we have Under the Eye of the Big Bird by Hiromi Kawakami and translated by Asa Yoneda. All I have right now is the jacket because I loaned it out to my daughter, but this is one of my favorite books this year. This is going to be on my top 10 list at the end. This is the one that I had trouble letting go and putting it back on the shelf. I kept backing up and rereading sections of it, and I know I just need to start from the beginning and read it again so that I can think about it a little bit more. I'll just read this teeny little bit. It really isn't going to capture it, but unfolding over geological aeons, Under the Eye of the Big Bird is at once an astonishing vision of the end of our species as we know it, and a meditation on the qualities that, for better or worse, make us human. It is about people as a species dwindling and the efforts to stop that, but it's just like it's not really, it's what it's about, but it's not what it's about. All right, moving on from that poor description. The next part of my dystopian section of this video is The Dream Hotel by Leila Laramie. This is a deeply unsettling book about the use of data and algorithms and the sacrificing of our personal freedoms to our convenience technologies. It's about a woman who she's not imprisoned, she's not detained. They have some sort of euphemism for it, but she is held up at the airport because something in her factor, I can't remember what they call it, but there's like a risk factor that she's at some sort of risk of harming her husband based on the content of a dream. And her experiences in this facility, and just in light of current events and how close we are in our technology to this being possible. If you think about recent news stories about the gathering of our data and the attempts by our current American government to create deeper and more sift-worthy ways of going through everybody's personal information to examine their attitudes and their behaviors. This is a scary book. This is not the only other one in my speculative pile, but I have another category that's kind of come up in a minute. But we have Death of the Author by Nnedi Okorafor. There's a book within a book. There's a super cool inner cover. It's about a woman who is struggling in her writing career. She's struggling as a writing instructor, and she writes a book that's different from anything she ever wrote before. It's a science fiction novel called Rusted Robots, and it becomes this runaway hit. And it kind of gets away from her in terms of exploding and becoming something that has a life beyond what she created when it is being adapted into a movie, and the fan base and their activities and the fan fiction. And then there's her own personal life as a woman with a disability and some technology that she gains access to. And she's a difficult and thorny and frustrating main character who's so interesting to follow, to both like and be annoyed with throughout this novel. And then the inner novel, we also get the Rusted Robots. We get a large portion of that novel inside this novel, and it's a cracking good story too. So Death of the Author was really fun. I also want to talk about, this is not a dystopian novel, it's Women Talking by Marion Taves, and this was a buddy read with Roz, and this was so good. This was a tight novel about a group of women sitting in a barn discussing what to do with the men who have committed a terrible crime. And they are coming into their own as people who get to make an independent decision for the first time in their lives. There's one man in the room who is the scribe for this meeting, and we get his point of view. And the book is literally women talking and trying to make some very important decisions. It all takes place over 2 days, and it is super tense. Just the atmosphere and the threat of violence all around. It's really excellent. I'll be reading another book by Marion Taves later this month with Amelia, and I'm really excited to read yet another, because every one of her books, there's certain themes or elements that reappear, but the stories are so completely different. Finally, I want to also give a shout out to a book I read right at the beginning of the year that was Beautyland by, now this was a library book, so I think I'm getting this author right, and if not, it will be on the screen, Marie-Helene Bertino. I think she has a new book out right now, and I'm going to investigate it. But this was a buddy read with Alan from Big Hard Books and Classics, and we had a really good time. This is a really unusual book. Actually, I have a category that I'm going to throw in here, and this is one of them, and it is weird books that I loved. So Beautyland was really strange. It's about a woman who grows up believing that she is an alien who is here to report back on human behavior through a fax machine. And there's a question throughout the book about whether or not, as a reader, do you believe that she is indeed an alien? And I will not tell you what the conclusion that we came to was, but Alan and myself and my daughter, who also read this book, we all felt the same about about our main character, whose name I'm forgetting, but she is one of my favorite characters this year. I'll put her name on the screen. And so, books that were weird, but I love them. So we have Beauty Land. This was definitely a book that was weird, but I loved it. And also, On Such a Full Sea by Chang-Rae Lee. It's another dystopian novel. The dystopia continues, Brother Bronte by Fernando Flores. And this one's not dystopian. It's a short story collection, but they were weird. There's a lot of body horror. And it's Ghost Roots by Pemi Aguda. So, there you have it. A pretty wide range of books. Hopefully you heard about something in there that you were intrigued to learn more about. Some of these will be reappearing in different formats, in different lists later on in the year. But I better wrap it up right there for now so it won't be too long of a video. All of these books will be listed in the notes for you to explore. I know I just gave a short shrift to that last batch, but I could feel the length building up. But we'll hold them up again. We'll give them a little moment here. But that's it. Hope you have a great day. Let me know what really stands out to you so far in your reading year. And I will be back on Friday. Bye-bye.